Mail time. Just a small package today, consisting of two things. A USB cable and some LED lights. So this should be 2 meters, 12 volts, cool white LEDs. So I will hook this up to a PWM pin on a WLED board so that I can control its brightness. That's for another time.
Alright, so I've got my fan. Here's the lid for the network switch, and here is the network switch itself. I'm just going to quickly plug the fan in and just ensure that it's going to work with this network switch. There could be some funniness going on, could be some proprietary something, I don't know.
Sorry for the horrible background noise. What I'm basically doing here is just checking to make sure that the fan I've got works in the switch, and for some reason it's not spinning very quickly. Using a multimeter, I check the pins on the switch to see what the voltage is, and it's sitting at about 9 volts, which usually I would expect it to be sitting at 12 volts. I also noticed that on the front of the switch I do get a fan error, but it doesn't stop the fan from spinning, so I'm just going to ignore it at this point. I decide to go out to the garage and pick out a couple other fans that I've got in storage that I'd forgotten about and recently found to see if any of these will perform any better. The conclusion is I did find another fan that looks better and will suit the part better, but it doesn't seem to perform any better than the ones that I purchased online.
So I guess all of these fans will now go into long-term storage.
Well, stored until I find a good use for it.
Now to find an appropriately sized hole saw. This is made for cutting through wood, but I mean, you know, what is actually the difference between wood and metal? They're basically the same material. Okay, maybe I put too much force on it. I'm gonna go get some earmuffs.
So I ended up spending the next allotment of time just trying so hard to drill through this metal with a wood hole saw. Changing out the battery on my battery drill, thinking that maybe it just needs a little extra power. Then I go the extra mile with that and change it out for an electric drill, hoping that without the restrictions of battery power, maybe then I can push through and actually get this to work. Side note, the chuck was seized on my electric drill, so I ended up spending a while just trying to get that out, almost breaking my wrists a few numbers of times. Had to tuck in my shirt to make sure it wasn't going to get snagged in anything. Then I felt like if I took it over and put it on the ground, maybe then I would be able to put enough force on it to force this hole saw to drill through a metal that's probably stronger than it. And as you can probably guess, with all of this force I'm putting into it, things just started to overheat. I even tried pouring some water on it just to cool everything off, but all that happened was a lot of heat was generated, and I was slowly getting to the point of destroying my drill.
Well, I'm basically trying to use a butter knife to cut a car in half. It's just not really going anywhere. The drill's slowly overheating, and there aren't really any thin things left on this.
It's been ground down quite a lot. And I knew it wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't just go straight through, but I did think that if I just tried hard enough that eventually it would work, but it looks like all I've done is scratched the paint. Not 100% sure on how to continue this, so I might just not continue this for a little while. I simply just don't have the tool set to perform this kind of job, this kind of task. So, I think I've just got to end this little section here. I got a shelf! This is just a Facebook Marketplace shelf. It's nothing fancy, but I did need and want a shelf in this area. So I'm just giving it a clean. I managed to haggle the owner down from a massive $25 all the way down to the low, extremely low price of $20, because I said I couldn't find $5 and they just said that I could have it for $20. I wasn't lying or anything. I just didn't want to put much effort into it. This isn't some sort of great shelf or anything, just a normal shelf. Nothing spectacular or interesting about it. I just want to give it a bit of a clean down, and then I'm going to store stuff on it. Sort of just what you do with this shelf. You put stuff on it. But I want to make sure it's clean. I've got no idea what these people were doing with this shelf, and I did notice that there was lots of stains and stuff, so who knows what sort of toys they put on this. In the last video we pulled this out in mail time, and I guess now it's time to actually check this out. This device ends up being quite the saga due to some oddities in how it works and operates. It's not quite stable. And as usual, due to moving, I don't quite have the tools and stuff that I want in order to test this a little better than initially planned. So we start off by getting a baseline, comparing my two computer monitors to see how quickly they're able to change from one color to the next. As you can see, they're more or less perfectly in time. If anything, the screen we're testing is slightly faster than my other monitor. Then I plug in this little wireless kit directly from my computer into the monitor. So that is a very short run, which it should be able to perform quite easily. Ready to pair. Huh, that actually gives us a lot of info. Alright, the transmitter is blinking. Pairing. Paired. Okay. And there we go. It's got the connection. And surprisingly, it seems to hold up. It doesn't have that much of a delay. I would say maybe a 1 to 2 frame delay, which for this price point is really surprising, but keep in mind that it is very, very close together, and once the distance between the two devices starts to increase, the delay will most likely also increase. Now, the harder part to capture and show on the internet is the artifacts that have arisen. I'm looking at this and I can see there's some weird mushiness going on. It doesn't quite have the bit depth, because I would suspect it's doing H.264 encoding, which is very similar to JPEG encoding, which means that these straight lines and this slow fade here are a little bit dithered. That said though, it is managing to hold it up quite well. Next, I'm going to plug in the receiver into a USB capture card and the transmitter into my video camera. Just a note, this whole time I have been powering these devices off of two identical USB power banks. Initially, I think this is going to be a fairly easy test. Just power up my camera, connect it to OBS, and hit record. I'm going to ignore the delay because the camera introduces delay, as well as the capture card needing to be processing the image and everything through the CPU and displaying it on screen. So the delay is not to be considered here. But the problem that I ran into was during recording, it would randomly just stop. In fact, it would completely crash the capture card. And note, I am using a fairly decent Magwell USB 3.0 HDMI capture card. I do change over to a very cheap $25 USB HDMI capture card. This cheap capture card seems to work perfectly fine. It's able to process the image and pass it through to the computer. The card itself does get a little warm, but it seems to be reliable and can even handle the camera being out and about in the property, moving around. This does put a bit of distance between the transmitter and receiver as I go around the house, but it seems to be able to hold itself together, though it is dropping a lot of frames, especially when it's more on the edge of the property and there's a few walls in between the camera and the receiver. The only problem with this cheap capture card though is it doesn't support audio, so it's not passing through the HDMI audio, meaning if I were to have some sort of external wireless mic, there would probably be some syncing issues. In terms of audio quality, it's about as much as you could expect. It does raise the noise floor, but it doesn't really degrade it much more than it degrades the video. Unfortunately, I wasn't focusing on audio. I was distracted by the other many issues I had, such as earlier you may have seen that the recording was a little stuttery, and that was just due to it needing to be turned off and back on so that it could sync its frame rate up properly. At least that's what I assume. For this delay that we're seeing here, this is not testing for the delay. This is not even testing. I don't know what I'm trying to do at this point, but it is clear that there is some weird oddities going on with things.
The other side of it is things look a little washed out and it looks like it's a real low bitrate. I'm really surprised it's made it this far, but it is dropping frames. The signal quality of these things isn't good enough for it to be a main image. Maybe as a good little scratch image for a live stream or something, but nothing too serious. And it seems like it'd be good enough for a PowerPoint presentation. I wouldn't really go any further than that. Video on it isn't very good. It seems like the white's value has been brought down and the black's value has been brought up, making it look reasonably crushed. It also has very low bit rate, which is why you see a lot of banding and stuff in pretty much every shot. That said, it is good enough quality for if we were to maybe give this camera a bit of a send-off. Since it can no longer internally record, this would probably be a great onboard camera for something. Maybe even if like we put it in a car and then, transmit the image to the Atmos Ninja and have that record the footage, then we'd be able to actually recover the footage from it when the car explodes. Obviously a crash, you just use a GoPro because they can withstand that sort of stuff. But I'd be interested to see or, have some sort of idea on how to utterly destroy this camera.